Today we're going to be talking about amplifying and augmenting your diet. I've shown you guys over the years ways to amplify your walking. That was actually, I believe, said first by my son, Jake, who I was telling him about like sled dragging and stuff like that. And he goes, oh yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like a way to amplify your walking. And I was like, damn, that's pretty smart. True. So amplified walking would be, walking with any sort of weight, walking with a little bit of weight in your hands or walking with weight on your shoulder, dragging a sled, pushing a tank, pushing a prowler, all that kind of stuff. But how do we amplify our diet? How do we amplify, modify, change our diet? How do we change our body fat percentage? How do we augment? How do we amplify our body to look better, to be more jacked-ist, and to be jacked and tan instead of Jackie Chan? If you want to be super jacked and tan, then you follow some of the principles that I've been following for many years. And my principles are to leverage protein. And we've talked about this many times before. I've mentioned protein leveraging. I've talked about Ted Naiman and some of the information that he puts out. And he talks about protein per calorie. And that's an interesting concept. It's interesting to, if you got in around 200 grams of protein a day, at the cost of around 2,000 calories. Your total calorie consumption was around 2,000, and the amount of protein that you consumed in that particular day was around 200. I think you'd be very, very lean. I think you'd be very happy with the results if you can maintain that. But it's kind of hard to maintain, and then people are like, what's got protein in it? Where does the protein come from? Some people know some of these things already, but it is hard to eat very lean. And that's why there's a lot of discussion about, should I eat high fat or should I eat high carb? And I'm here to tell you that maybe the answer lies in the middle. You'd be like, God damn it, I knew it. I knew Smelly was going to go with, counting calories and like being in the middle. That's not really what I'm about to share with you today. I am going to share with you about the amplification of your protein and about augmenting your meals and stuff like that. But I also am going to share with you this idea here, and it's this. Just because you have found your rhythm with a low-carb diet does not mean that that diet has to be high in fat. Now, I know someone would say, well, where are the calories? I need more food, I'm hungry. Well, keep the protein high, and that should help keep your satiation. You want to be even, more satiated, then eat more vegetables. There's a lot of things that you can do to be more satiated, to feel more full. You can add egg whites, you can augment your meals, which I'm going to get into in a minute. But you can also, if you're going to go very low fat, that's not a green light to go with crazy amounts of carbohydrates. Now, I learned a lot from the sugar diet. I think the sugar diet's awesome, and I think that I will continually go back to sugar dieting, or I will continually go back to, a sugar diet, like half day of sugar fasting, followed by kind of a normal day of finishing the day with some protein and maybe some starch, or maybe just protein, and maybe just straight protein in the evening. We'll kind of see. I'll mess around with some different things and report back, because I'm going to weigh under 200 pounds for my 49th birthday, which is coming up December 10th. So I got to get cracking on that. When it comes to augmenting your meals, one of the things that we're trying to do is we are trying to increase the amount of protein without increasing the total calories too much. I personally think that if you work out and you break down muscle tissue and you're someone that trains for hypertrophy, I actually think that protein is a 0 for calories, me personally. But that's just me personally. You might not like that, or you might not agree with it. But if you think about the logistics of it, it kind of makes sense. I'm breaking down protein, and then I'm eating protein. Isn't our net like 0? Is anyone following that, or does no one understand what I'm talking about when I mention that? That math might be a tiny bit skewed, but we already know that protein, there's a thermic effect of food that happens with protein, and protein is wrongfully given a 4 calorie per unit number. So we already know that that's at least off a little bit. If anything, protein's like 2 calories, but I still think that it's 0, but it's not 0 for everybody. It's 0 for the people that lift. And that's why I say, if you don't lift, you don't count. And again, why I say that is because we are breaking down protein often because we train pretty hard. And for those of you doing hypertrophy, it's even more profound, and it's even more reason to eat a little bit more protein to make sure that you have that nitrogen balance. Augmenting a meal. Let's say your dad, you're talking with your dad. Your dad has some pretty bad health outcomes. He, got some blood work back, and it turns out he's just not doing great. His lipid profile is bad. His A1C is off. Like, he's got like 4 or 5 things that are off. Triglycerides are off, glucose, fasted insulin, like a couple things are off, And you start to talk to your dad about like what he eats, and his bad habits, but you don't talk about, what he eats, an hour after dinner when he's sitting down watching TV with your mother. You just talk about like, the healthier stuff that he eats during the morning, and everyone just kind of glances over the other stuff that he does. Maybe that's not so healthy later in the day. But anyway, he wakes up every morning and he has oatmeal. He's trying to start his day, a particular way. He maybe crushes up a couple walnuts, throws those in there, or raisins, or banana, or something like that. And everyone thinks that that's healthy, right, to have a meal like that. And I'm not saying that it's not healthy. But he has that, and maybe he has a cup of orange juice with it or something, or maybe he just drinks water with it. Depends on the person, right? And that's kind of his breakfast. He eats that. And then at lunch, he has like a sandwich and maybe some soup. And like that's kind of all he has there. And then he has a dinner, and maybe the dinner has some like chicken or some sort of meat in it as like an entree, and it's got like mashed potatoes and some vegetables. Not a horrible day of eating, like it's pretty reasonable. And then dinner gets over with and stuff, and he's like, oh, I want a little bit of ice cream. So he has like a little bit of ice cream. He does that a couple times a week. Let's not throw the guy in jail. It's not the worst diet I ever heard of. But how do we go back, and how do we fix, and how do we amplify his diet so that this 200-pound guy or 220-pound guy doesn't start to not only have bad health outcomes, but start to really acquire, or really start to pack on more and more pounds? Most people are eating more than what I just mentioned, so maybe there's some snacks in there and stuff like that too that I forgot to throw in there. A bag of chips or bag of Doritos with the sandwich and so forth, right? A little bit of stuff that's like not so great. How do we amplify? How do we change some of this? Well, we just take that breakfast, say, Dad, you know what, man? Do you think you could eat the same breakfast? And do you think could you have, 2 or 3 eggs with it? And are you cool with like some egg whites? And he's like, egg whites? Sounds disgusting. And you're like, all right, shit. Hey, how about that yogurt that Mom eats sometimes? You ever try it? And he's like, no. It's like, sounds gross. It doesn't have any fat in it. Like, okay, could you try that? Have you ever tried that? And sometimes, for somebody else, you might have to like make these things, or have them try it after you augmented it, right? So what I would do is I would take, I take 000 yogurt. I usually throw a scoop of vanilla. This is the whey protein from Within You brand. I throw that in the yogurt, 000 yogurt. Now 000 yogurt's already amplified with protein, but I want to dump more protein in there because I want to rev up the amount of protein. And some research shows that when you eat protein early in the day, it's going to have an even better impact on your satiation, and your hunger signaling is going to be driven down a little bit. That's the whole point of protein leveraging in the first place, is that when your body is taking care of a protein, it's not searching around for more calories as much. Now, if you just ate straight chicken breasts, of course, you're going to be absolutely starving. But you do understand that if you ate a chicken breast before you ate a meal, how it would like kind of slug down your hunger a little bit. Imagine if you ate a chicken breast and an apple before every meal. It's like, holy shit, that would really slow down those cravings, and you'd still have cravings because you're not satisfying that need, but you would feel pretty full and pretty stuffed after you got through eating a little bit of your meal, if you had that chicken breast and that apple. Amplifying a meal is simple. You're just trying to add protein to it. So you take a yogurt, throw a scoop of whey protein in there, and now that yogurt that has 15 or 20 grams of protein now has like 40 or 50 grams of protein. Oatmeal really doesn't have hardly any in it at all. For those of you that do like, oatmeal or a breakfast cereal, I like rice and grinds personally. I've been mixing some cooked egg whites in there. I've been doing that for a long time. It's awesome. Egg whites don't have a ton of flavor. They are a little sulfury. I know that not everybody likes them. I recently have been making like pancake mixes with egg whites as well, because the people over at Rice and Grinds are geniuses, and they made a rice flour that has a sweet potato in it as well and has some really awesome kick-ass flavor. And when you kind of mix those things together, again, you're able to really jack your protein up. Now, you're also, eating a decent amount of carbohydrate, but because we're not eating fat, we don't really have too much to worry about with that particular meal. Not that fat and carbohydrates are all of a sudden going to make you fat, but fat and carbohydrates together make it easier to overeat. I repeat, fat and carbohydrates together make it easier to overeat. If you want your calories to just go through the roof, you eat something like pizza. It's really easy. With just a couple slices of pizza, it's very calorically dense and tastes amazing. And so for a bigger guy, eating like 2 pieces of pizza, like just not enough food. But even if we were to take the example of pizza, it's like, hey man, you want to start to make some changes. Okay, your family's going to order pizza. Oh, hold on a second. You need to fat-proof yourself. Just like you child-proof your home, you go around and fix the different outlets and you make sure the stairs are blocked off when you have a young child that's crawling around and sticking forks in outlets and trying to go down the stairs when they can't walk. You child-proof your house. Well, you have to fat-proof your house too, and you have to fat-proof yourself. Somebody's like, yo, let's order some pizza. And you're like, reet. You're like, fuck. Like, I've been doing pretty good on my diet for the last 5-6 days in a row. They want to get my favorite thing. They want to order pizza. I kind of want in on this because I want to watch a movie and chill with my family and just sit there and eat some pizza and dip, some of those breadstick things in some ranch, and I just want to love all that stuff. Well, if you can control yourself, you can still do it because you can amplify. And what you would do is you would eat a chicken breast or 2, cook up your chicken breast, hurry up before the pizza comes, eat a chicken breast or 2, and try to eat less pizza. You could still enjoy some pizza. But if you eat the pizza when you're already full, it's going to be that much harder. Also, there's some evidence to show a second meal effect. When you eat a protein and you protein load, that the impact of the sugar and the carbohydrates that you ate from the pizza is going to have less of a less of a sugar spike. It's going to be less likely to make your sugar go up, right? Not that that's necessarily a horrible thing, but it's going to help you to control that glucose, and normally helping to balance out that glucose helps us with hunger, helps us with cravings, and usually helps us disperse the glucose throughout the body more evenly when we're not all of a sudden getting hit with these big spikes. Because if your glycogen stores are already full and you're spiking your carbohydrates up, I do think it's probably a little bit easier for those carbohydrates to have nowhere else to go except for being stored as fat. And remember, you're mixing fat and carbs together, you're kind of rolling the dice on some stuff anyway. So you want to be careful in those situations, but you can amplify every single meal by adding protein to it. Now, some of you might be thinking about a protein shake. Protein shakes are dope. Protein shakes are great. I sell protein shakes. Pick some stuff up from Within You brand. The steak shake is the best tasting protein shake in the world. It's got liver, kidney, heart, spleen, pancreas in it. And it also has 4 different types of protein. We got whey, egg, collagen, and beef protein. So that product is absolutely amazing. Try the steak shake, try the total carnivore shake. Go ahead and order those off of MBSlingshot.com and go and check it out. Aside from just a protein shake, though, as much as I love protein shakes, protein shake can be really helpful. Like when you're going to go out to dinner, I'd say, hey, yeah, definitely have like a 1 or 2 scooper of a protein shake, mix that thing up and drink it. I drink mine in the car, usually on the way to dinner. And I know that at dinner I'm ordering more protein. And you might be thinking, man, this is protein overkill. What the hell are you doing? But this is what needs to be done. to soothe the animal, to soothe the beast on the inside that wants to come out, that wants to overeat. Because remember what I've said before, I've said this many times, most people don't need a diet. They need a plan that ensures that they're not going to binge. Most people don't actually really need a super clean diet or super clean diet plan. They just need a plan that deters them from ending up face down, nose down in a big old thing of pie or a big old thing of Ben & Jerry's or whatever it might be. We need to get rid of these binge habits. And that's why you've heard so many people talking about retatrutide. There's some powerful drugs out there that are deterring people from binging, which I think is amazing and is another topic for another day. And we'll bring in some more experts to talk about that. And I think we had Vigorous Steve talking about retatrutide on a podcast probably about 3 years ago, maybe even longer. And now you hear so much about it. Without those techniques aside, or those pharmaceutical interventions aside, we can do something similar by just loading up on protein. So the protein shake before you go to dinner is another great way of doing things. But some chicken breast, a really simple, easy way to cook up chicken breast, or you're going to think this is the most disgusting thing you ever heard of. Just throw it in a pot. It's the easiest thing ever. Just like grab a big old pot and throw the chicken breast in there and just boil it. And then take the chicken breast out and just shred it all apart or cut it with scissors. And it's little tiny bits of chicken breast. Throw some seasoning on there. If you want, throw some salsa on there. And on these occasions where people are engaging in eating other things that are less healthy, you could take that chicken breast and you can shovel some of that in your face. Because you don't want to just be relying only on protein shakes, and you don't want to just be reaching for yogurt all the time either. It's good to get like a little bit better of a mix. And that's where the chicken breast can come in really handy, or the chopped up steak, whatever you can afford, do things in your own particular way. But if we go back to that scenario in the beginning of dad, not eating so good, you have him make some changes. Can he augment his lunch? We already augmented his breakfast. We talked about how he was mainly just having oatmeal and orange juice, and he was having shit all for protein in the morning. He was having maybe 14 grams of protein or something like that. A lot of people might have like 2 eggs, 2 slices of bacon, and they might have like an English muffin with some butter on it and some orange juice. Like, talk to ChatGPT, ask it what those calories are, right? What's going to happen with that is, like, you're thinking, okay, the protein's probably not too bad because you got 2 eggs, you got some bacon in there, but the fat calories are way too high. And for the amount of protein that you gathered from that meal, you made a giant mistake because you accumulated too many calories per the amount of protein that you got. 2 eggs, let's say 5 grams, let's say 6 grams of protein, so we're up to 12. There's really no protein in the English muffin. We'll give you like 1, so now you're up to 13 grams of protein. 2 slices of bacon. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you're up to 16 or 17 grams of protein. Not horrible, not the worst report card I ever heard of. But here's the bad news, is you did it at the cost of having 6 grams of fat in each egg. So there's 12 grams of fat, okay? Let's see, 2 or 3 grams of fat in each piece of bacon, right? So your fat calories, your fat grams and your protein grams are the same. They're the same. The problem being is that your protein calories, as I mentioned earlier, I think they're like next to 0 calories, but they're listed as 4. Your fat calories are 2 times plus a little bit, twice as much as the calories from protein. So you only got in 16 grams of protein, but you also got in like 16 grams of fat, or maybe 20 of each, right? Like, just to make the math a little more simple. We don't want that score. We want to change that. If anything, You want to have more like 40 grams of protein and maybe only have like 5 or 6 grams of fat. Like that would be money. And how do you get that? Well, you get that through what I'm talking about here today, the amplification. I made a meal the other day. This is how I amplified my meal. I cooked up 93.7 lean ground beef. What? I said I cooked up 93.7 lean ground beef. What? Don't worry, I'll stop doing that. But I just can't help myself because I always think it's stone cold. What? 93.7 lean ground beef, 2 packets of it, right? Then I had 99.1 turkey. So I already took the 93.7 and I already made it leaner by adding in the turkey. For argument's sake, let's say I made it 95, it's like now 95.5, just for argument's sake. I change the composition, the body fat composition of the food that I'm about to eat. Remember, I made a video a while back, like if you eat 5% fat, it's going to be easier for you to get to be 5% body fat. You are what you eat, and in the absence of fat and the absence of too many carbohydrates that put you over your caloric intake, you're going to get shredded. You're going to get completely shredded to the socks, as they say. So keep following along with what I'm sharing here today. And you're trying to, every time you have a meal, you're trying to make sure that your energy that you're consuming is moderate to low. You don't want the energy to be like in the basement, because then your energy will be in the basement. But we want our carbohydrates and our fats. Remember, those are the primary sources of energy for us. Primary source of energy for us is carbohydrates and fats. And remember, fats kind of slow everything down. And they have their value. Slowing things down is not a bad thing, but it will slow everything down. It will slow down your metabolism, slow down everything. It will slow down digestion, which sometimes is warranted and sometimes a great idea. Quick example. You have 2 eggs and 2 slices of bacon and you have nothing else with it. That actually can sometimes be a really great meal. Maybe have an avocado with it. I know we just jacked the fat way through the roof and we don't have a crazy amount of protein. And I did a little bit of the opposite of what we're normally talking about. But not every situation calls for you to like spike the shit out of protein all the time. I am going to Kansas tomorrow with my wife. That's where she went to college. I am going to leave at probably around 8 o'clock in the morning. I might have 2 eggs. I might have a fattier protein meal in the morning tomorrow, because the next time that I might eat anything might be on the plane, where I'm going to eat some like beef jerky and carnivore crisps on the plane. So because I'm going to have a long time in between the meals, I actually don't mind that fat being in there, because it's going to kind of carry me through, because fat takes longer, right? But again, fat and carbohydrates together makes it easier to pack on more fat. And remember, fat and carbohydrates are our primary sources of energy. The best source of energy, in my opinion, depending on what you need the energy for, is most likely, for most people, most of the time, going to be carbohydrates. The carbohydrates will keep your energy system, it will keep everything running hot. In addition to that, there's also been some research showing that people have been cured of their insulin resistance. People are not really cured of insulin resistance when they go on a low-carb diet, but people have been cured of their insulin resistance when they've been given a higher carbohydrate diet, which sounds crazy, but there's more and more evidence of this being shown all the time. And if you look up some stuff from Walter Kempner, I think his name is, you can check out Dave Feldman's information, along with Mike Fave. They have tons of information on this and tons of data that will blow your socks off. How it helps with the good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, triglycerides, A1C, and all these other things when you're fed just like kind of a shit ton of carbohydrates. I think one of the reports in the Kepner thing was like 600 grams of carbohydrates a day to help people that had diabetes. I mean, that's wild. So when someone goes on a low-carb, high-fat diet, they go under. They kind of sweep under the problem of insulin resistance, but they don't solve it. They don't knock it out of there. They don't fix it. They're just no longer dealing with insulin. They don't have insulin like floating around anymore because they don't eat carbohydrates. And that's a technique, like that's a method, like sounds fair. However, and it might be a temporary method, and it might be a great way, like as you're building muscle, like there might be a lot of great things that could happen with that. I had tons of success with a very low carb diet. I wrote a book called The War on Carbs and had awesome success with that. And it was great, but it sort of messed up a lot of stuff in my system in terms of, not so much in terms of how I handle carbohydrates. Usually in my blood work, my blood glucose, fasted blood glucose was higher than what it would be if I was eating carbohydrates. So my insulin sensitivity sucked. My insulin sensitivity sucked. It's way better now. It's getting a lot better with, not necessarily with more carbohydrate, but with more carbohydrate in my diet, period, it's getting a lot better. And so this idea of kind of amplifying your meals and spiking some of the meals with protein is to help with your hunger control. But something I discovered through doing the sugar diet was this. Just because you're going to go low carb doesn't mean that you need to be high fat. And just because you are going low fat doesn't mean that you need to be super high carb. I mentioned that earlier, and I mentioned like kind of honing in the middle there. And I'm not saying to have a balanced diet. I'm not saying, be 33% of all three of the different macronutrients. I'm not saying that at all, because I don't really believe in that. I actually think that the two best ways to stay lean for long periods of time is a low carb diet and a low fat diet. I think both can be really effective. Now, I think within the confines of those two things, in the low carb group, just remember you don't need to be high fat. And just because you're low carb doesn't mean you need to be low carb all the time. Why not give yourself an influence of carbohydrates here and there for particular activities, particular workouts, particular things, right? If you're more sedentary, you don't move around as much, well then stick to that low carb protocol. But like, what are we talking about when we say low carb? I'll just say this, like I would say under 100 grams a day would be low carb. Somebody might say, no, low carb's under 50. I'm just saying under 100, okay? Because I even think for the low carb person, they should be eating some carbohydrates. 100 grams of carbs a day-ish, 50 to 100 grams of carbs a day-ish should keep you pretty good. I would still say, maybe a little more fruits here and there, and maybe on some days where you train a little bit harder, if you train twice a day on some days, or just have higher activity outputs, go ahead and ramp the carbs up a little bit more, and maybe lower your fats a little bit more. But for that person that's on that low carb diet, I still don't see any reason for that person to be way upwards of 100 grams on their fat. Maybe if you're a tank, maybe if you're like Ensema usually does, I think he says around 120 grams of fat or something like that. But like, that's a big dude with a lot of muscle, right? And his output is insane. His workouts are awesome. His jiu-jitsu stuff, he's getting after it, right? Most people are not, 245 pounds and fucking like 7% body fat or 8% body fat, whatever he is, right? So he's in a little bit of a league of his own over there, but like he still knows there's no reason for him to have like 200 grams of fat a day, or 250 grams of fat a day, right? So again, just because you are low carb doesn't mean your fat is blasted through the roof. Now on the other side over here, just because we're staying on the low fat side and, I need the carbs for energy. Well, you only need so many carbs for energy until your glycogen stores are full. Well, how do we know our glycogen stores are full? We don't really. It's a guessing game. You're kind of going off of like how you feel. How do you feel when you get up? Do you feel like lightheaded and stuff like that? Like if you feel lightheaded, something's off with your hydration. Maybe you don't have enough carbohydrates and salt and some of these things to supply you and to give you the blood pressure that you need. It means your blood pressure is getting a little bit on the low side. And it could be from weight loss and all these other things, right? So there are things you can kind of check off or have a little checklist, like check your performance, check your PRs in the gym, check your times when you're running. check in on some of these things. If they're getting better, then you're, green lighted to continue with your 400 grams of carbohydrates a day or 500 grams of carbs a day. But what I learned from that sugar diet, I did 1,000 carbs a day for a few days just to experiment, just to kind of feel it out. Didn't feel like it did anything negative to me, but at some point it just felt like it made me like sluggish, like no need for all this amount of food, this is crazy amount of food. But then going down to like 500 and 600 grams of carbohydrates felt way more comfortable. And on a day like this, where I got a lot of activity in on the treadmill, I'm gonna lift in about 4 hours or so from now, three or 4 hours from now, I'll have another session, so I will, get after it with carbs and maybe even make up for it a little bit more tomorrow because I might not have enough meals to really nail down the carbs that I need. But we'll kind of see how the rest of the day goes. So on certain days, you're going to want to bring those carbohydrates up, but again, there's no reason for you to perpetually just always think like, oh, I'm going to be like at like 500 or 700 grams of carbohydrates a day. So the main thing I'm trying to share here is that you have these two options between these two different diets. And you could always go down the middle. You can count calories and like that's fine. And that would be going right down the middle. And you could have a balanced diet. And if you can manage that and stay in shape and stay lean the way that you would like, then go ahead and do so. But for me, I like these opposite ends because they both feel really good to me. I have not done like a low carb diet in a while, but I've practiced some low carb stuff here and there. I still usually consume diet sodas. I still am carb conscious when I'm consuming things. I'm not like just voraciously like just eating carbs left and right just because I'm like, oh, my body runs off of glucose, right? Keep in mind, I am still working on losing weight. I weighed 212 this morning, and my goal is to get down under 200 before my birthday, December 10th. So we have a few weeks to work on that, and I'm going to, solidify that by utilizing a lot of these strategies I shared here today. But regardless of the diet, you can amplify your protein in either case, because in both cases, I want you to have your protein to be fairly high. Now I know that there is benefits of having your protein be low occasionally, and we saw that in some of the research and some of the stuff that came out about FGF21 and so forth. But it is kind of a stressor, so I don't know how much people want to mess with that. But there'll be more information. There'll be more information that comes out about that. The sugar diet isn't dead. It's going to rear its ugly head again, and it will have a little time in the sun as there's more research that gets done on it. There's research. People are researching it right now to try to learn more about how it works and if there's truly a distinct advantage over specifically going after sugar, or is it just more of the protein restriction that has a benefit. But it appears, as always, like there's logical answers and logical reasons to some of this stuff. It seems like some bouts of protein restriction can be really beneficial, but if you hang in there for too long and do that too often, you're not going to get the rewards that you're looking for. But part of the restriction of the protein is probably very similar to what happens with fasting. When we fast, we get a huge amplification when we eat again. So the fast was wonderful and did a lot of cool things for us, but it's the eating that feels so good and the eating that does so much after the fast. Kind of like the best glass of water you're ever going to have is the glass of water that you have after you ran a marathon. It's going to taste better. It's going to be different than, it's like that absence of water, that absence of hydration was something that you're like, holy shit, this, even though water doesn't have necessarily like a distinct taste to it, you're like, holy crap, this is unbelievable. And I think the same thing happens when we pull way back from something or we don't have something for a while. In the case of protein, I think that's exactly what's going on because there's all these things that are upregulated in the body. I think the body's freaking out. It's like, hey, like, dude, like we need protein. It's really critical for our survival. What are you doing over there? And when you discontinue eating it, I think our energy system increases. That's been shown with the FGF21. Your metabolism increases. Why does your metabolism increase like that? And why does your body start to scavenge fat? Why does your body start to like burn more fat in that state? well, it's going to start to pull body fat off of you so that you can still think and move and maneuver to continue to work towards getting towards food again. At least that's some of my theory, like from our ancestral days and stuff like that. But just a theory, take it for whatever it's worth. Amplifying your meals, double dinners, eating chicken breast, eating protein shakes, eating yogurt and stuff like that before you have a meal can really do so much for you. And in the video I shot the other day, as I was talking about this earlier, and I interrupted myself and got off track a little bit. As I was talking about this like big hodgepodge of stuff that I made, I had the Piedmontese beef, the turkey, and I added beans to it. Now beans are primarily adding fiber, so barely any not a lot of carbohydrates from beans, but there is carbohydrates in there, carbohydrates and fiber, but also added a lot of protein. Then I also added egg whites. I know you're thinking, oh man, egg whites and beans, like were really a recipe for your stomach to explode, but I didn't do a ton of either one of them. But there was 20 grams of protein in each one of those. So 20, 40. Then I added collagen. I added 2 scoops of collagen protein in there, just straight collagen protein powder from Bub's Naturals. And I whipped that, like blended that in there. I do that sometimes with different foods. It doesn't change the flavor, just adds protein, adds collagen. And then I dumped some bone broth in there. And now we're talking about augmenting and adding 80 grams of protein, adding hardly any fat to the overall calories, just adding tons of protein to everything. And so you can see how by augmenting that food, I made that food so much leaner. And that's the food I'm about to go eat in just a couple minutes now, because I cooked up like, a big old giant pot of it. And I threw some salsa in there, some spices, some seasoning. It tastes absolutely amazing. And what I did is I added rice to it. And I'm going to add rice to it. I mentioned like the workouts and stuff. And I'm going to add, an appropriate amount of rice in accordance to the workout that I did today, and in accordance to the workout that I'm going to be doing here very soon, very shortly. And so when you cook for yourself, just always understand and know that you could change everything just by increasing the protein. Now, there are other methods. You could strain away fat and stuff like that, and I'm for that, like the Foreman griller and some of that stuff. That's cool. But it's really going to be hard to get the results you're looking for if you're eating like 85-15 lean ground beef. Like that sounds lean, but it's not lean. Just to give you an example, 93.7 lean ground beef has, in 1 pound of it, has 32 grams of fat. That's kind of a lot of fat. Now, on the other hand, it's getting close to 100 grams of protein. So for the 100 grams of protein, the 32 grams of fat isn't that horrible. But again, you are what you eat. So if you're eating foods like that often, then you're probably going to get pretty lean. But if you're eating a meal like that, but then you're also throwing cheese on there, see, this is where people get messed up. They augment their meal the wrong way. They use sauces, they use sour cream, they use all this stuff. Cheese is interesting because cheese is 1-to-1 for protein and fat. But there's really not, the people that are really lean in this world, they don't really eat much cheese. There might be somebody like, I count my calories and I have a block of cheese every day. Okay, cool. Great, good for you. But like you have to really manage the amount that you eat. So most people just choose not to eat it. When it comes to ranch dressing or mayo, like people that are in shape, they don't eat those things. It's just easier not to have them. And hey, look, sometimes people say, hey, well, there's really nothing wrong with those. There is something wrong with those foods. They're just plain fat, and they don't really serve us in any way. Mayo is seed oils. Ranch dressing, more seed oils. These seed oils, in my opinion, they're a little more damaging, I think, than we originally even thought. And I don't think they're worth it. They taste awesome, I get it. But grab get some Greek yogurt. Your Greek yogurt can have some fat in it. It doesn't have to be completely fat-free. Get some Greek yogurt. and get some ranch mix. Take the ranch mix, dump it in the thing, mix it all together with the Greek yogurt, and you got some ranch. I know it's not the exact same flavor profile and not the exact same flavor that you normally might get from your regular ranch dressing, but these are the sacrifices that we have to make sometimes to be in really good shape. Eat your fruits, eat your vegetables. Those are also going to take up some room, take up some space. Those are also going to prevent you from being really super hungry. Don't forget about things like celery and carrots and apples. Those are all great options while you're just sitting there watching TV. Even though the apple has some sugar in it, it also has a lot of fiber, and it's also going to help really fill you up. This video I know was amazing for you. It was amazing for me. And let me know what you guys think of it in the comments below. Strength is never weakness, weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.